Hello, welcome to my channel. Another bibliophile reads, and I am in week 5 of my 100 book challenge. And it's really kind of the 500 book challenge, but that will come later. So what have I been reading over the past week? Actually, not a whole lot. For whatever reason, I've been putzing around and farting around and just not getting to reading all that much. So I don't have a lot to share, but let me tell you what I have completed. Book number 22 was an audiobook, and that is Red Harvest by Dashiell Hammett. It is the first novel in his Continental Op series, and the Continental Op is a private detective out of San Francisco, or is it LA? One of those two. But anyway, he's hired to come to a smaller town in California to do some business. But when the Continental Op gets there, the person who hired him has been murdered. And from there, the Continental Op decides that he's going to go on a murder investigation and see who knocked off his client. And as it turns out, this town, which is nicknamed Poisonville, is totally run by gangsters. The police are totally corrupt. The business leaders are in cahoots with the gangsters, and everything is turning into a wild shoot 'em up as the Continental Op slowly starts working his way through the myriad amount of people who may be involved in this murder and the reasons behind it. There is a wonderful femme fatale that the Continental Op gets involved with, who of course was involved with the murdered man. And the bodies start piling up. Now this is one of the very first sort of crime detective novels. It may actually be the first. And there's a lot of stereotypical happenings. I know Michael K. Vaughan mentioned that the whole image of the police in cars and having a shootout from there is an image that comes right from this novel, and that is the first time it was ever used in a book. So Dashiell Hammett was very inventive in his use of crime fiction. And I did enjoy this. This is actually a reread for me because I eventually want to go on to the other Continental Op series, and I thought I should familiarize myself with the character again. Did I like it? Yes. Is it the great book of detective crime fiction that it's held up to be? Sort of yes and sort of no. It did not capture me as fully as like the works of Raymond Chandler, or even the Maltese Falcon, or the Thin Man. It just didn't quite get to that level for me. But it's high enough that I definitely want to continue on and read the other novels in the Continental Op series and his short stories. So I will be continuing with it. The next one I read is for a book group. We're having Unboxer. And that is Mouse. This is Mouse 2. And this is Mouse 1. I read them both this week. And these are graphic novels, but they're incredibly well done. They tell a very moving story. And it's just a certain way that Art Spiegelman has of telling the story. It sort of starts off with Art Spiegelman visiting his very old and curmudgeonly father. His father is not a nice person when you meet him in this book. But then the father starts telling the son about his experiences in Poland before the war. And you see how the Jews were treated and how he had at first a very successful business as a Jew in Poland. He was marrying into a wealthy family, and it looked like his future was set as what would have been a leading citizen in Poland. And then, of course, the Nazis took power and started slowly taking away the rights of the Jews. And that part of the story is incredibly powerful. There is one scene towards the end of Mouse 1, it's on page 105 or 104, just one little image that just stopped me in my tracks, looking at that going, okay, that's what they lived through. Very, very powerful. And Mouse 1 ends with his father being led up to Auschwitz and all the events that got him into Auschwitz. And then Mouse 2 takes it from Auschwitz on to the end of the war. And there is also one really, really powerful scene in this one. It's not too much of a spoiler, is where Art Spiegelman is in a drawing, and it's not Art Spiegelman as a mouse. It's Art Spiegelman wearing a mouse mask, and he's sitting at his desk, and he's just, you can tell by the way he's slumped over that he is just in utter thought about his creation, because in this book he's already published Mouse 1, and he starts shrinking in the images because he just can't deal with everything that he's talking about. So these two books hold up with the very best of Holocaust literature. I would say they hold up with If This Be a Man by Primo Levi and Night by Eli Wiesel, and highly, highly recommended. After that, I finished another audiobook. That was The Revenge of the Rose by Michael Moorcock. And this is a book in his Elric of Melniboné saga. Now, this is a book that was written in the late 80s or early 90s, well after Moorcock had finished his saga before. And it just does not have the same feel as his earlier stories. Most of his earlier stories were actually novellas and were published probably in magazines originally. And they were maybe 50 pages each. And each of the books that were published in the old DAW paperbacks, which were usually about 150, maybe 190 pages, had maybe 3 of the novellas. So they're very concise. And this novel, I said, was written many years afterwards. And in the storyline, it starts with a paragraph that it's between 2 of the novellas, and Elric is whisked away in the middle of the night from his stains in the city of Tanalorn and goes on this wild adventure that's kind of out of time and place. So he can have a very long adventure and return to who he originally was, and everything fits in with the saga timeline. The issue I had with this is that it just felt like Moorcock was meandering a bit too much. He had more room than a novella. He had a whole novel to fill. And this novel is probably longer than most of the old DAW paperbacks were. So it's a lot of story to fill. And I don't think there's enough story to fill those many pages. So it meanders a bit. And honestly, I just felt like the old Elric mojo wasn't coming through on this story. I enjoyed it, but it just felt like Moorcock felt he had to write an Elric story for whatever reason and was going through the motions. Now, I'm probably a bit different than a lot of people who don't think series should go on endlessly. I think series should have a finite number of books. And for the most part, I think that's always under 10 books. And the Elric saga is growing since when I first read it as a high school kid in the 80s, which is probably one of the reasons why I did not rate this as high as I would have rated all the other Elric novels that I have reread in the past year or so. And those are all the books that I finished this week. Not really that much. Now, to be fair, I have been reading a little bit of this every day. The Brothers Karamazov. And I'm holding up this bookmark because someone in a previous video said, wow, what a great bookmark. Doesn't really fit with Brothers Karamazov, but there we go. And I'm trying to read about 20 to 30 pages a day. And I'm falling a little bit behind because I've got a lot of other stuff to do. But this is still one of the greatest novels that have ever been written. And I hope to finish it this month. If not, maybe squeeze a little bit into January. I've also been reading The Passenger by Cormac McCarthy. This is, of course, his first novel in like 16 years. It's not like his other novels. It definitely has a different feel to it. Of course, he's been writing this book for some of the critics are saying he's been writing this book since the 80s, and he's just now publishing it. So it has kind of a disjointed feel to it. I know Brian at Bookish commented that this really isn't a novel. And a couple other commenters on YouTube have mentioned that this is like a collection of essays in fictionalized form. He wants to get on topic and he wants to discuss it. So he gets his character Bobby to go visit another character, and they just have a long discussion about a topic. Interesting in parts. I'm actually more fascinated with the second story because one of the story deal with Bobby, and who is a refuge diver who has found a wrecked plane that may be missing a passenger, and he's having some trouble with the government. But that story I don't think is interesting as the story of his sister. And his sister has committed suicide. And you learn about that on page 1 of this book, so there is no spoiler. And her story about how she's ever creeping closer towards suicide is the best part of this book so far. Because she is schizophrenic. She has hallucinations. And she has conversations with an imaginary boy just called the Kid. And it's not the Kid from Blood Meridian. This is, I forgot the technical term. It's when you're born with no hands and just have flippers instead of hands. And he talks with her. And of course, he's a figment of her imagination as she's descending into madness. I have about 80 pages left, and I hope to finish that today. I have also been reading Dangerous Visions as a group read with David Wiley and a few others. And we're going through a short story per day. And this is all supposed to be a science fiction written in the 60s that have something dangerous to say about society. Unfortunately, it was not unfortunately, but time has progressed. And some of the ideas that people thought were dangerous back then are just really not that dangerous nowadays. I know in the Philip K. Dick story, there was a lot of talk about drug use, which back then would have been shocking. And nowadays, I just pass that over as just du jour. It's like, who cares if they're taking drugs? But you know, this anthology, I haven't finished. I'm only about halfway through. It is not aging well. The stories just look old. And I know some science fiction doesn't age well, and I'm sort of fearing that that is the fate of this anthology. Well, anyway, thank you for watching, and keep on reading.